Judy. This is one thing can't fail at this time. All right, so some of you have had the privilege of knowing working with Judy in the past, and she's been I've been blessed to know Judy for a few years now, maybe a few too many, we won't count, but Judy is a passionate educator by trade. She used to be an elementary educator, and I would say she retired from that role to pursue more passions of hers outside of the classroom. And she is a true coach through and through, from an executive function coach to a parent coach to an adult coach. And there is at this stage in her her career, I would say there's no type of profile she hasn't helped. So I've asked her if she could jump in with us on this occasion and put on her 4 tendencies hat and give us really a deep dive into the really empowering us to help our rebel personality, our children that might be outside of not fit the box of typical parenting, and really force us to work differently as a parent to help them. And so Judy lives on the South Shore in a quiet town in Situate, Massachusetts, a beautiful waterfront community, and she's married with beautiful children of her own. So she's through and through dealing with the same challenges that we deal with as parents. So without further ado, I'm going to transition over to Judy. Thank you for leading us through this next hour, Judy.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that warm welcome and your really in-depth knowledge of what it is to be a parent and what it is to help our parents. We are all a community. So as I was preparing for this presentation tonight, I started thinking about what I was going to say, and I started realizing that a long time ago, my journey as a parent coach started with our rebel students. So as I learned how to work with some of our kids, some of the kids were a little bit trickier, and I really had a hard time working with them because they wanted to do what they wanted to do, and it wasn't my agenda. So my journey as a parent coach all started with one of our rebels. So as we are, and of course, can you hear me?
Again.
Okay. You can, good. And I am unable, let's see, here we go. Okay, here we go. Sorry, I had a technical difficulty there for a little bit. So we're going to talk about Gretchen Rubin and the 4 tendencies. So tonight we're going to start with what are the 4 tendencies? Just a quick little hit on that one, because we're going to really do an in-depth jump into the rebel. And most importantly, we're going to really work on strategies that work. I know you came here not to just learn about the rebel, but to figure out what to do. And remember, we're going to have things to remember, and then we're going to have time for questions. As David mentioned, if you have some questions, feel free to ask them as we go along. We'll try to figure out whether they should be answered right now or at the end of our presentation. So it all started with Gretchen Rubin. I started really thinking about, as a coach, I'm a big nerd, and I want to figure out how to be the best coach I can be. And I started noticing that there were some of my coaches, now these were the grown-ups, because I work with everyone from little kids all the way up through, 60, 70-year-olds. I think that's kind of that's been hit my limit. But some of my clients would just take the skills that I gave them and they'd run with it. They'd just go and they just do the thing. And some of them would come back week after week and be like, I couldn't do it. So I started doing a lot of research. What is the thing that is prohibiting some of my clients from being successful to do the thing that they want to do? And some of them could and some of them could not. So in my research, I found the 4 tendencies. No. And as I was looking, I think somebody has their microphone on. If you could just check your microphone.
Where it says X.
I got it.
Thank you. So Gretchen Rubin has these 4 tendencies. Now I'm just going to briefly go into this because it is really important to understand all the different tendencies. So there's first the upholder. Now the upholder is really good at meeting inner expectations and outer expectations. Now, what's an expectation? So an inner expectation might be something like a New Year's resolution. I want to start an exercise program. I want to get really good at managing my money. An outer expectation is something that is expected of you. So maybe a boss, or if with our students, it's their teachers. So that might be something like when an assignment is due or how to do an assignment. So the upholder is good at both inner and outer expectations. To give an example, if you went to the doctor as a grown-up, so I want you to start thinking about yourself. If you went to the doctor and the doctor said, hey, you have this going on with your body, go ahead and do this diet and this exercise program, and it's going to help you be healthy. The upholder will say, okay, we'll walk out and actually do the things that the doctor expected. Yes, because the doctor expects it, and also because they care about themselves. They want to make sure that they are doing what's right for them. So the upholder is great. They're really easy to work with. They do what's expected, but they sometimes can be a little rigid in what they think needs to get done. So there is that little bit of rigidity with an upholder. So now there's the obliger. The obliger is really good at meeting outer expectations, but not so good at the inner expectations. So with our students, an obliger might look like somebody who is can get that project done, but kind of gets it done at the very end. So needs that outside accountability of when a project is due to get the project done. An upholder might get it done a couple days early, or at least a day early, because they care about not adding stress to their lives. The obliger has a hard time with that. So the obliger is going to need that deadline in order to get it done. They're also going to do really well at group work. So group work is my team is counting on me. So I'm going to make sure I get that done for my team. So they might be able to get something done early for the team. Now there's the questioner. The questioner is, just to go with pros and cons for the obliger, because every single one of these tendencies has pros and cons. The pros are, they are the backbone of society. They're constantly volunteering and staying late and doing things for work and school. The cons are they are prone to obliger burnout. So they might do too much and then get burnt out. And they do need that pressure of the deadline or something along those lines. Then there's the questioner. Now the questioner resists outer expectations and meets inner expectations. But here's the caveat. It needs to follow logic. So a questioner is going to question everything. They want everything to make sense in order to do the thing. So the questioner at school is going to make sure that they understand the assignment, and they're going to look for best ways to do things. If the teacher says you need to do it this way, and this way, the questioner is not going to just do it like the upholder. The questioner is going to say, does this make sense? Let me think about this. And they might do it a different way because it makes more sense. So outer expectations become inner expectations when they follow by logic. Now, this questioner goes to the doctor, and the questioner says, okay, so, and they might ask the doctor a gazillion questions, or they might walk out and consult Dr. Google and do their own medical advice. The obliger, on the other hand, will go to the doctor and make the doctor feel heard and seen and do the things. But when they go home, they might do the diet and exercise plan for 3 days, and then without that outside accountability, have a hard time following through. So the questioners are really good because they're always looking for the best ways to do things. They're questioning things without following things blindly. However, they can exhaust the people around them by the gazillion questions, or they can exhaust themselves. They are constantly looking for better ways of doing things, or having a hard time making decisions because there's too many options. Okay, now while you're here is the rebel. The rebel resists outer expectations and inner expectations. So they're the trickiest of them, because they might not even go to the doctor because they don't want to. If they feel like it, they might go to the doctor. If they don't feel like it, they might not. So they're not going to do something just because you expect them to. Now, if you're an upholder parent with a rebel kid, it's mind-blowing. You just cannot understand. If you want to do these things, why can't you follow through and do them? Because your minds were completely different. So the rebel, we don't want to villainize the rebel because the rebels can be really cool. They are out of the box thinkers. They're not afraid to push the edge of limits. They're constantly trying to be innovative, but they can have a hard time with getting out of their own way and doing the thing that they want to. So again, what is a rebel? Well, you might think of Rebel Wilson, or you might think of maybe you're rebel without a cause, and like somebody riding a Harley. But really, a rebel can look sweet and innocent and is just a person. One of my best friends is a rebel, and she's the sweetest person you ever did meet, but she's a rebel. She has a hard time moving through both inner and outer expectations. So that's all that is. There's no, it's not an evil thing. We don't want to demonize the rebel. It's literally they just sometimes can't get out of their own way. So let's talk about the characteristics of a rebel. They love freedom. They love choice. They love self-expression and authenticity. They're not going to be fake. It is really important for them to be true to who they are. Yes, they resist if they are told what to do, but they love freedom and choice and actually like pushing through and pushing the status quo. So if you know that their reaction to resistance, then sometimes they can be easily manipulated. So you might say something like, I bet you can't run a marathon. And then they're going to be like, oh yeah, I can, I'll show you. Or they might say something like, you would never be interested in, oh, no, yes, I am. Or if you have little ones, oh, only big girls go to the potty, but you're a little girl. No, I'm a big girl. So I'm sure we remember some of those strategies when they were little. A few more facts about our rebels. They love challenge. So they can be very bored by the mundane, by repetition. They love fixing things, building things, creating, being innovative. One of my favorite stories about rebels is I watched the movie Jobs the other day with Ashton Kutcher, and I knew this presentation was coming up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Apple was founded on a rebel. This is a guy who constantly pushed the envelope, never wouldn't wait, like needed to have the best product, but needed that challenge, needed that innovation, and constantly pushed. I'm sure he had questioner in there too, so he was constantly looking for the best ways to do things. But rebels can be super cool too. They love to take risks, and hopefully these are good risks, positive risks. And interestingly enough, some rebels are really drawn to very regulated environments like the clergy, the military, or the law enforcement. And this is because it gives them more opportunities to flout the rules, to cause little mini rebellions. Super interesting. I was very surprised when I read that. But it made sense because I have some rebels in my life. Just to give you a little sneak preview with my how I worked this with my family. We were watching a movie one night. It was like a weekend night, and I really wanted to find out more about my family. So I have two kids, as David mentioned. Right now they're 16 and 14, and I had the quiz hot in my phone, and I just said, "Hey, let's do a quiz." And I texted them a quiz. And everybody took the quiz, and I found out what their tendencies were. And we have all 4 tendencies in my house. So I have lots and lots of practice seeing the different tendencies in action. And to give you a little bit more on this, most tendencies, you're usually like one major tendency, but then you sort of lean towards another. So I'll fully disclose, I'm a questioner. So I'm constantly looking for better ways to do things, hence where we are with the 4 tendencies. This is the single most helpful thing other than parenting with the brain in mind, the single most helpful thing for helping kids figure out how to get things done, how to manage the expectations. So I'm constantly looking for best ways to do things. And yes, I have a rebel. I would say 75% of the people I coach, so whether it's the students, the grown-ups, or in fact, the children of the parents are rebels. And I just happen to get a lot of rebels, so we have a lot of practice. It's not easy working with a rebel, but you can certainly figure some things out. So rebels without a cause. So you've heard of like the rebel with a cause? Well, they're in heaven. They're in like the best place, but a rebel without a cause will cause discomfort for themselves and others. So what happens there is that they don't have anywhere to channel their energy. They are looking for something to do, something to put all their energy in, something to challenge them, and they don't have it. So if you have a rebel and they sort of seem like restless, that might be because they don't have a cause. One of my friend's kids has a rebel, and she had her student. Now she was younger, let's say 6th grade, and so she was too young to have a job. And too old to be doing like typical camp things that she had done in the past. So one summer she had her bake dog biscuits for troops. This was back when the troops were overseas, and she had dog biscuits for the troops, and she loves animals, and she just imagined them overseas and eating some biscuits. So this child organized everything, bought the materials, figured out how to get it over there. She had a true cause that she believed in. So she was really happy with that. However, they don't respond to micromanagement. So if somebody had stood over this child and made sure that she baked those dog biscuits exactly right, it probably wouldn't have gone so well. She had freedom. She got to choose things. They also don't do well with routines, advice, directions, schedules, supervision, and repetitive tasks. Kind of like all the things we're trying to get our kids to do and how we're trying to get them to do them. So if it's not working in your house, you might have a rebel. Likely strengths. So our rebels can be independent minded. They can be outside of the box thinkers, unswayed by conventional opinions. So if everybody in school is doing one thing, we're all wearing our Leatherman jackets and our I'm thinking back to when I was in high school, our tight roll jeans and Leatherman jackets. Our rebel had the leather jacket. However, now if everybody's wearing leather jackets, your rebel's going to wear the Leatherman jacket. They're just going to be different. They don't want to do what everybody's going to do, and they love being different. And they're definitely in touch with their authentic desires. They know what they want, and that's most important to them. Possible weaknesses, well, they can be resistant because if they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. And they're going to struggle with those repetitive or mandatory tasks. If they just have to do it just because, that's going to kind of ruffle their feathers. And they may act as if ordinary rules don't apply to them. So if you have a rebel who drives, they might not enjoy following the speed limit. So they might not, or they might roll through the stop sign. So sometimes things like traffic laws, an upholder is going to stop. They're going to do the speed limit. A rebel is going to have a harder time with that. They can be restless and they can't stand a routine or planning. Okay, now what you've all been waiting for, the strategies. Let's talk about what you can do with our rebels. So things that work. They may love to meet a challenge, but in their own way, in their own time. So let's think about a reading challenge. If your rebel, if there's a reading challenge, that might make them read, not because they want to become a better reader, and not because they have to, but they might actually do it in their own way. They might be a little bit innovative. So that might be the way that they get to stay up later, or they might figure out a way to read, instead of the 3 books, they might read 10 books or 20 books. So they might really stand up to that challenge. They might be innovative. So you have some Girl Scouts and they might be selling cookies, but the rebel might think about this and stand right outside a Weight Watchers meeting and sell to those folks coming out of the meetings and really knock it out of the park because they've been innovative and they wanted that challenge. They really wanted those, the reward for the many cookies. One of the most important things I want you to hear tonight is they may choose to do things out of love. Now, like I said, I work with a lot of rebels. And what I have found is that I might have a student named Ashley, and she doesn't like, isn't doing well in science. And I started talking to Ashley and I said, well, last year that was your best subject. And she said, oh, well, that's because I had a different teacher. Mrs. Schumacher was a really good teacher. And I said, oh, so your new teacher this year, Mr. Davis, is, what about him? Well, he's all right, but I don't like him. If your rebel doesn't like a teacher, they're not going to do well in that class. I've heard this from many of my students. So if they love that teacher, no matter what it is, they might flourish because they feel appreciated. They want to show up for that teacher. So interestingly enough, I've talked to these kids and I said to them, so you're going to let Mr. Davis determine your grade? Now, for a rebel, that's a challenge. They're going to say, oh, I didn't realize Mr. Davis was I was letting Mr. Davis determine my grade. And that challenge has switched the energy of a rebel so that they're like, I'm not letting him determine my grade. I've seen this happen a couple times. It doesn't happen every time, but it can happen where kids feel that challenge and they don't want to give their power away. They don't realize they're giving their power away, but when they do, they can switch their energy. And then we talked about they may follow their passions or belief in a cause. So for example, a rebel who loves the environment will organize a protest rally, will strap themselves to a tree, and all their executive functions will come online. But without the passion and the drive, they may not exist. And that's really tricky with our students because if you're here, your child might have executive function challenges. So some of this could be executive function challenges, and then the rest of it could be rebel status. And quite often, they come together. So that's the tricky part. So one of the most effective things I talked to you about that helps with our rebel is when we increase our connection with them. I created this course called Parenting with the Brain and Mind. And in this course, we go over how to really understand the point of view of a child, how to connect with them, and therefore they feel heard and understood and are more likely to go along with what you're saying, to be on board as opposed to opposition. So I just wanted to throw this out. I realized the class starts next Tuesday. So I was like, oh my gosh, everyone here, rebels do really well with the skills that are in this class, mainly connect and redirect, which teaches you how to connect, how to understand the point of view of your child. So I just wanted to let you know that this is like the biggest tip with our rebel.
Judy, can I ask you a question too? Some people may be wondering, and I am, is the rebel personality, the rebel tendencies in relation to maybe ADHD tendencies, maybe, and also, there's this profile that sometimes gets a little more complicated when you think of oppositional kind of behavior, and how that can get more complicated if I'm not fostering that connections with my child. If there's too many, if the fighting and the arguing and the battles are perpetuating these negative patterns, it can lead towards these kind of oppositional behaviors. And I just was maybe maybe you can get a soundbite on what that what maybe your thoughts are on kind of on those profile types in relation to the rebel.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is tricky to tease out executive function challenges with the rebel personality. In fact, Ned Halliwell and Rady wrote a book called ADHD 2.0. And in that book, they describe having ADHD, and a lot of it looked just like the rebel tendency. So it is a little tricky to tease out. If your child does have ADHD, you're going to see some overlap. In fact, the way dopamine works inside an ADHD brain is tricky. Now I could go, we actually did an entire talk, I think it was last year, about dopamine. So I can't go, I can't take up the whole hour, but just to give you the sneak preview with this, if your child is ADHD, they have their dopamine receptors are different than a neurotypical child. So as I understand it, there are more of them. And so their brain absorbs dopamine much more quickly. So what does that mean for you? That means they need more dopamine, and it's harder for them to motivate to do things. A lot of people think that dopamine is the reward chemical because you get a reward. But what happens is there's a different part of your brain that gets flashed when there is a reward, but dopamine tells us what to pay attention to. I hope that makes sense. So if there's something like, you might walk along your house in your bedroom and you see a sock on the floor, dopamine gets released. You bend down, you pick up the sock, and you put it away. Your child who has ADHD has different dopamine receptors than you. So the child walks, they see the sock, maybe the same amount of dopamine gets released. However, that child needs more dopamine in order to fire off enough to motivate to bend down and pick up the sock. So I hope that makes sense. And just to lean into the oppositional defiance question that you mentioned, David, I think this is different. That's a disorder. This is a tendency. So there's definitely differences and magnitude. However, with both, I would recommend really working on connection, really working on seeing your child, understanding your child, and meeting them where they are. And that tends to be the biggest help when it comes to helping kids feel heard and seen and want to be there for you. Maybe want to pick up that sock because they know it's gonna mean a lot to you. Where if they don't care and you're pissing them off, they're gonna walk right by that sock and not care. So connection and again, meeting a kid where they are is going to be the best thing. It can be really hard when your kids are feeling prickly and they're having a bad day. It's hard not to take it personally. But if you can stop for a moment and try to really think about what they might be feeling inside. And if they're projecting attitude, then they're probably hurting inside. And that's the thing that helps me most when I see prickly behavior. So again, another topic I can talk about days with. So I hope, did that answer your question, David? Thank you. So with our rebels, identity is super important for them. So they really want to stand out. They want to know who they are, and they want to project their identity. That's when you might see the punk rock hair or piercings, or maybe they want to be the rock expert, and nobody else is the rock expert, but they're going to be the rock expert. So it doesn't all have to be like our typical negative look on things, but they're definitely going to figure out who they are and what's important to them. How you can make this work for your rebel is you can help them become aware of what their identity is and help them choose their identity. I've even done this again with grownups, with adults. Alan came to me and he's like, things are just not working. And Alan was a rebel meets an obliger, which is an interesting combination, but I get to see them all. I don't get that many upholders unless you're parents, but I do get a lot of rebels, questioners, and obligers. So Alan said to me, you know what, Judy, I'm doing life right now and it doesn't work for me. And I said, well, who do you want to be? He goes, I want to be a person who's balanced. I want to be a person who shows up to my work and my customers really respect. He's in a trades field, and I want to be there for my wife. That's his identity. That was the identity he was looking for, and so we worked towards him obtaining that identity. Now, unfortunately, it had to go kind of bad before it went well. He had to like burn out and not work well. But then after experiencing that like bottom, he realized who he did want to be, and he turned his entire life around. Really cool story. So with your student, it could look something like, I am a student who gets their work done and has a lot of free time. So with our students, identity is important and freedom is important. That's going to come next. I had a student, I had talked to him about this. I said, there's these 4 tendencies. Can I tell you about them? And I kind of gave him the rundown. And he said to me, he goes, oh my God, Judy, I think I'm a rebel. Now, of course, I knew this, but he didn't know this. And he finally had a name for it. And he finally understood himself. I swear he almost cried. And so we worked really hard on figuring out what identity he wanted. And that was the one he came up with, because he would say, I'm getting ready to do my homework, and my mom can say, hey, how's the homework? Because I worked with mom. We worked on tone. So it was no longer like kind of like bitey, but it was really neutral or friendly. She would use a friendly tone and say, hey, how's homework? Just by her asking that question, he's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And he couldn't make himself do it until we realized what he was doing. And he's like, I'm not going to let that stop me. Now, did it work every time? No. Did it work more than it was working before? Yes. So as he held on to the freedom of getting my work done and then doing whatever I want, that's what got him through homework every night. Or maybe your rebel wants to be a person who's fit. So instead of skipping the gym, that's like obtaining that identity of being a person who's fit is going to motivate that rebel to start working out. Or perhaps it's, I'm a talented artist who people admire. So now you might inspire by helping your rebel figure out that they want to be an artist that people admire. You can say something like this. I wonder how you can get there. So you want to be an artist that people admire, huh? What do you think it's going to take? Now notice that like neutral tone. Notice that like little bit of like hot stock tip tone. If you go straight in with a rebel, you're not going to get anywhere. If you say to them, oh, you want to be an artist? Well, that means you need to take classes. You need to work hard. You know what? I don't see you working very hard on that canvas work. That let's get crack-a-lackin' and you can get ready to be an artist. That's going to turn them off. They're going to want to run the other way. But if you help them sort of lead, help them figure out what is going to get them to their desired results on their terms, again, they're unstoppable. So I just want to ask you here, I've given you a bunch of information. Here's a little pop quiz, just so you can get your creative juices and moving, and you can kind of wrap your mind around this. How can you use the strategy of identity with your rebel child? So we have 4 options. A, you need to, so you're the parent. You need to do this or you'll never be successful. B, what kind of student do you want to be? C, what do you think Mrs. Spellman will think if you hand this in this way? Or D, let's make a schedule. I can help you plan out how this will look. You can use the chat. You guys are so great. Cameras on, ready to go. David, if you wouldn't mind, we're going to use the chat and we're going to look for answers.
I don't know if the rebel's going to answer though. I mean, we may just...
If I have any question, right? Well, I have some. I did.
Someone's
start with
going to
my
question your choices here. Why is there not an E or a D?
All right, we have an overwhelming B. You guys are good. What kind of student do you want to be? You want to really stick with that want. Once I started realizing how powerful the want word was, I use it with all my clients, quite honestly. Okay, now we're going to talk about habit change. Information, consequences, choice. This is another big strategy for those of you who are cooking dinner. Give the child information about the situation. Then you're going to follow up with tell him the consequences, what they would be. And then let the child choose. And here's the caveat. This is the hardest part. Without micromanaging, lecturing, or shaming. That's so hard because you want to help them be successful. But what a rebel child will do best is learn from natural consequences. So, for example, let's do an example around sunscreen. Information. All right, so it's really sunny out and you're going to have have protection for your skin. Consequences. If you don't wear any sunscreen, you're going to have a sunburn. So you can either wear a sun shirt and hat or put sunscreen on. There's the choice. So now your child has to choose. It's not you can get burned or not burned. It's which one do you want to do? I had one of my students, parent coaching clients, had a child who was a really big rebel, and he used this strategy and it worked awesome. So Darren was having a birthday and he wanted to have a party at his house. So his dad said, all right, well, if you want to have a party, then the sun porch has to be cleaned out. Information. Consequences. So if you do clean out the sun porch, then you can have a party. If you don't clean out the sun porch, then we won't have a party, and we'll just take you out to dinner. You get to choose whether you have a party or go out to dinner. Darren cleaned out the sun porch in advance and had his party, and everybody was happy. And this was a really big rebel. Here's another example. We've all had kids need to clean their room. So if you want to have your child clean their room, you can say something like this. Grandma and Uncle Henry are coming over on Saturday. We need to make sure you tidy up your room before you hang out with your friends on Friday. Consequences. First, this is an open-ended one. I wanted to put this in as an example. This isn't you can go out with your friends or not. This is first you need to clean your room and then you can go out with your friends. So your choice is you get to decide when you are free to go out with your friends, right after school on Friday, maybe later or not at all. So now you're giving your child choices of when they will be able to have that freedom by doing the thing first. So information, consequences, choice by the way, works with all 4 tendencies. It's a really powerful skill. Okay, one of your other strategies for habit change is freedom. So the last example actually worked with freedom. When you do the thing, you will be free. So they love when things feel like a whim or a choice. You can put chores in a jar and like there's a whim of whatever you get. With rebels, you might want to use a lot of choice. So for example, I just need you to do chores. You can do the vacuuming, the dusting, or clean the pool, as long as they can get their choice. I actually had another rebel student, Carl, who his dad wanted him to do the dishes, unload the dishwasher. And instead of unloading the dishwasher, Carl chose to do a much harder chore, which was to trim all of the hedges in the garden. Now, this kid had a love for his dad, so he wanted to help, but it was so important for him to have choice and freedom and whim that he took a chore that could have taken 2 minutes, emptying the dishwasher, and probably spent 45 minutes doing the hedges. But this was a true rebel with love of his dad, and so that's how it kind of came out. So another example of using freedom, this child can be thinking, exercising with YouTube videos is so freeing, I don't have to pay for the gym. Your kid might not think that because they don't have to pay for the gym, but maybe they do. Or getting homework done is so freedom. I can do anything I want now. I literally used this strategy last week with a kid. They didn't want to do their homework and they just couldn't get themselves to do the thing. And when we switched it to how much freedom do you want? How do you want to spend your evening? Do you want to spend 4 hours staring at your computer, or get it done and then hang out for 4 hours doing whatever you want? It was like a light bulb clicked and that child got into gear and got the thing done. So some of the things that suit a rebel, setting their own schedule. They love that. Setting up their own environment. They might want to like figure things out so that it works well for them. They love flexibility. They love novelty when everything is different and when there's no expectations. And they love to make it fun. So, any ways that you can make something fun is going to up the rebel factor. Okay, so rebels work best in results-oriented environments. Now, what does that mean? They don't want you to micromanage them. They want to know about the outcome and they want to sort of be innovative on how they get there. So results are going to be more important than the process. And they can get bored quickly with repetitive work. And they do really well with delegating and collaborating with other people. Okay, when on a mission, they can be efficient, diligent, and reliable as they want to be. This is the rebel with the claws is unstoppable. This is the rebel who will chain themselves to the tree, for the Greenpeace efforts. I had a friend who, this was back in 1980 something. Her brother was told by their guidance counselor, "You're not college material. You'll never go." And that, I guess he was a junior, turned his life around, got his grades up, went to college, and is now very successful and lives in Scituate. Now that's a rebel. He was told he couldn't do it and he rose to the challenge. Now, I don't think I would recommend telling a kid he'll never go to college. You might get fired as a guidance counselor right now, but for this kid, it worked. He rose to the challenge and got going. So something that helps is really having clarity on what you want to do. We kind of spoke on this before. I like to talk to kids about, when you're 25. When I was 25, I was having the time of my life. I had my college degree. I lived with my friends. I had a short house, a ski house. I was having a great time. So I always kind of go to that time of my life and no major obligations. So you can sort of ask them, like, where do you want to be? They most likely won't know. So you can just kind of ease in, where do you want to be when you're age 25? Like, where do you want to be living? What do you want to do? And most kids don't have exact answers, but they can say something like, oh, I want to be living in a city with a nice, apartment with my friends. I want to have choices of what I want to do and how I want to spend my money. And when you can kind of help them see that picture of the future, it's easier for them to align their now actions with that beautiful picture in the future. I had one of my biggest rebels I've ever seen, didn't know what she wanted to do, didn't have anything, but she knew she wanted choice. And so she said, you know what, I don't want one of those jobs where I have to wake up early. I said, oh, so you want choice? She's like, yeah. I said, well, how do you think you're going to get choice? And she goes, I guess I have to get a college degree. I said, oh, what do you think you need to do to get a college degree? And then she was like, I guess I have to get good grades. I was like, oh, what do you have to do to get grades? So she told me what her dream was, which was choice and fun. And I just helped her connect those dots. But if I had told her what she had to do, stick my finger out, her rebel's going to go running the other way. Okay, just a couple of thoughts. They love to defy expectations and do different things, do things differently than others. They love letting their imagination run free. So open-ended choices. They love to do hard things with style and sometimes can even run experiments. Now, I want you to pay attention here. This is something that I've seen personally with some of my rebels. She needs to be careful with whom she shares her biggest dreams and desires, because if somebody starts expecting things of her, she may rebel against the thing she loves most. So if somebody has too many questions, has too many expectations, or praise or encouragement, she may rebel against your expectations and her own desires. So let's talk about an example. Maybe Susie wants to be a writer, and someone might tell her, you know what, you should publish your work. You're such a good writer. I can't get over what, the flow of this writing piece is amazing. By you giving her positive reinforcement and expecting her to publish her work, she may lose her desire to write. So it's so sad, because all you want to do is foster the love of something. But if you have a rebel, it might make them turn the other way. So I want you to think about the rebels in your life. Maybe one, maybe more. And now think about what you've understood all about this last 50 minutes as we've talked about the rebel. I think I was supposed to talk for 30. Sorry, David. And I want you to think about how you can implement some of these changes. Think about what's happening. With a rebel, you never want to go straight in. Unfortunately, you got to do a little extra work. You got to go around the corner. You have to kind of figure out, start with your why, start with figuring out how to help your rebel with their identity, find freedom, choice. I want you to just start to think about how you can implement. Sometimes we throw so much information. I want you to just pause for a moment and think about how you can help your rebel. Anybody wants to share, we can, or we can certainly open to questions or any of that. But I wanted to give you that pause, that call to action. I can see a lot of thinking. That's great. So does anybody have any questions? Do I see a little rebel over there? Oh, you're going to ask what he or she wants. Excellent. Yeah, what do you want? That's exactly it.
Judy, I have a question for you.
Mhm.
Oh, Jeffrey has one. Okay. Can the tendencies change over time?
Oh, good question. Thank you. I can answer that. So typically, okay, so a lot of students, I'm glad you brought this up, a lot of kids aren't always clear on their tendencies. Grown-ups are usually pretty clear. They have one major tendency, maybe slightly another. Kids, even Gretchen Rubin doesn't know all of her tendencies. Sometimes it's really clear. Like I work with a lot of students. I would say 75%, I know exactly what their tendency. 25% I don't know. So sometimes with even just being a kid, your tendency is a little big. Now, so we're going to just sort of say kids are their own thing. As an adult, they tend to stay the same. So if you are a 25-year-old and you're a questioner, you're going to stay a questioner your whole life. If you're a 30-year-old and you're an upholder, you're going to stay an upholder your whole life, except if you have a major life something or other go on. So for example, if you're an upholder and you suffer some cancer and you went to a doctor, you got a treatment plan and it didn't go well, you realized you didn't get a second opinion. You might turn into a questioner, still have your upholder tendencies, but you might become more of a questioner based on some big life determinations. So mostly once you're an adult, your tendency will stay. Kids are not always as fluid. Sometimes they are, and sometimes there aren't. It's not as standard. That was a great question. Thank you.
Yes.
Did that answer you? I know I stopped you.
That's great. The other thought maybe you can add into is when when we allow our children a chance to be part of a process, right? Maybe it's building our routines and schedules and feeling like they have choice, like you've highlighted a bunch of times, regardless of the tendency. Those moments where they have choice can be empowering, more so maybe for the rebel than maybe some of the other tendencies. But and then the other piece I think I wanted to reiterate, or maybe even see if you can highlight, is when is building awareness in these tendencies can be empowering as well, and be eye-opening and informative. So as we learn about whether the ADHD diagnosis can be empowering to understand tendencies, understand a medical condition, understand what are my superpowers, what are my strengths, how do I manage these attentional challenges. And just like the rebel personality and these other tendencies, understanding the strengths, understanding maybe the tendencies and areas of strengths and weaknesses can be empowering and informative.
David, that is such a good point. And that's sort of like, ADHD can have your strengths and you can have your struggles. And the rebel tendency, all the tendencies are exactly the same. And so your awareness, once you build awareness of which tendency you are, you can determine. So if you are a rebel, you can know all those wonderful attributes of the rebel. And then your acknowledgement of the rebel tendency, you might be like, you can rebel against your rebel. You're going to say, no, I'm not going to let that take me down because I care too much about being an artist and who people know or whatever it might be. So that's a really great point. Thank you, David.
Yeah.
Oh, we have a hand.
Tracy has her hand up. Thanks, Tracy.
Sorry, I didn't really know I hit the the button, but that's fine. I have found this the most helpful meeting I've had in a long time. I am also a teacher, and I have plenty of rebels in my class, and I don't know always how to motivate them and get them to, do as I'm asking. And I know I change my questioning techniques with them, different ways, but it's not like I'm aware that actually the process I'm actually doing, I'm just trying to survive the class, usually. And then the
So
same
using
thing
your
at
instincts.
home, I try to use what I've learned, you know what I mean, in the home setting with the routines and different things to, get through. But I don't think I've ever learned the 4 tendencies as this is all about. So I think that's really cool to learn more about it.
Oh, I'm so glad it's
Not really a
helpful.
question, so.
And as a teacher, a former teacher, I completely understand where you're coming from. And with your students, I don't know how old your students are, but there is a 4 tendency quiz. So I know that was part of the email that you got, but maybe you missed it. So you can simply Google the 4 tendencies and the quiz pops right up. And then there are also lots of YouTube videos as well as the book. So if you want to learn, if you want an easy access point, take the quiz, watch the YouTube videos. And then of course, even the audiobook is really great. But I think I have another question. I see, is it Nolan?
Yeah, it's funny. Sorry. I've been trying to change it since we started. No, I want to say thank you. This has been amazing. I was laughing and going like this the whole time because I feel like you described my son to a T. It's difficult, but it's just so funny to me because I literally was upstairs with him the other day and I'm getting a text from my fiance, stop micromanaging him. He's just like, I didn't think I was. He won't get in the shower unless I stand there and make him get in the shower, so it's funny how all these things you describe, I mean, oh my God, to a T. And then, like you said, you were saying something earlier about like the love, but such an empath. Like he says his superpower is that he feels everybody else's feelings.
Oh, that's exactly, yeah.
So it's like you have someone who's a rebel, but yet he has the heart of gold. It's a struggle to parent. I mean, I don't know if anybody else has a child like that. He's 10 years old. I think he's like a stand-up comedian someday. He has the best personality, but he's such a little shit. Like on a regular basis, I feel like I ran a marathon at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, okay, time to go to work. but he's such a good kid. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that struggle of parenting, it's challenging. So I appreciate everything you've shared. Thank you so much.
Oh, you are so welcome. And the hardest part, when you can't micromanage is to let them feel the natural consequences. It is so hard. In
Yep.
fact, I'm going to share a little something. When I give this talk to our coaches, because it's so helpful, that I was like, I talked to David. I'm like, we need to tell everybody about this. It's so helpful. And one of our coaches is a rebel and stayed on with me afterwards. And, and as an adult, it was really cool to watch a very responsible coach who's also a rebel. And he really shared with me. I was like, what is it like to be that? And he said, because that's the one tendency I'm not, is a rebel, which is so funny because I seem to be this expert on rebels. But he was telling me, he's like, Judy, like you can't tell somebody what to do. I had to experience it on my own. I had to get really uncomfortable. And then sometimes I learned, and sometimes I had to do it again and get really uncomfortable and learn it again. So as a parent, it's really hard to watch your kids not thrive, but learn those lessons over and over and over the hard way. But it's the only way to really help him learn. And, and we all can remember the best lessons of our life were not the ones that we were told about, but the ones we learned on our own. So it's super tricky.
And Judy, to that point too, he has the biggest heart.
You know who I'm talking about. The
Like,
biggest heart. Oh,
biggest
that's true
heart.
too.
I mean,
Yes.
if you need him to move you out of your home by himself, he would come and move you out of your home. Right? Don't ask him to. He'd just show
Yep.
up and do it.
And actually, just to throw David under the bus, he used David as an example of like all the things to do. This is how you do life. Clearly not a rebel. And then he's like, and I watched it and I couldn't do it. I had to do it my own way. And then he did learn, but on his own time and in his own way. So thanks for following up, David. That's great.
Yeah, thank you for that. These meetings, these connections, these presentations, I feel have been really empowering for parents to just connect and share and feel like there's a village out there that maybe they can relate with. And Judy's groups are very similar to that too. So that's one of our missions with these groups that we form and cultivate is in these training or these when people want to take more out of this, those groups be really powerful for them to really feel like they have people to share ideas with and connect with. And so, so no one feels like they're on an island of parenting, right? Which you feel like most of the time. So to not have to do that is pretty cool. So in the interest of time, we try to stay punctual in our world of executive function coaching. It's probably good to practice what we preach. But thank you, Judy, and thank you all for hanging in there for this hour and for just being active in this time with us by showing your face and asking great questions and sharing this energy with us. Really appreciate it. If any topics that you would like to hear from us, please let me know.